everybody likes fishing dry flies. And I know that today there's borderline religious fanaticism over some types of nymph fishing. And admittedly, they probably catch more trout, but you'd be really hard-pressed to find somebody that even the most ardent nymph angler watching a fish surface feed over and over again won't clip that whole rig off, throw in a dry fly, and hope to see that dry fly take. It's an iconic moment in fly fishing that so many people are drawn to when they think about this pursuit. But not every rise is the same. In fact, by watching the different kind of rises, you can really determine what you should be using and how you should be approaching that fish. The book that we're talking about today didn't discover this, but it did a lot to popularize it among the fly fishing literary public. We'll talk about it today on Casting Across. Hi, Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. And today's book is In the Ring of the Rise by Vincent Marinaro. It's another book in the South Central Pennsylvania Anglers Library, but it is the kind of book that is applicable for fly fishers who are pursuing trout anywhere and everywhere. Now, before I get into the details of kind of the thesis of this book, I did want to mention the circumstances that led to the creation of the content of this book, as well as a number of other books that came out in this time in this area. And it was men who were spending a lot of time and a lot of their own resources in watching fish. They were watching fish so they could know how to better approach them and catch them, but also so they could understand why some fish were surviving, some were thriving, some were reproducing, and what conservation efforts were beneficial and which ones were causing volunteers and state and federal agencies to simply spend money and spin their wheels. And so there's a lot more to it than that. But one of the cool things about this book, about Marinaro, about some of his contemporaries, was that they were not just about catching fish. They were about figuring out the bigger picture and how that often meant doing conservation work alongside of prospecting for trout. Well, with that said, why In the Ring of the Rise? Well, this book begins with, and really the highlight of this book is these color plates showing different parts of different rise forms for fish, and why they may rise in different ways at different times and other different circumstances. And now this is 1976 photography, but it is still really good, and it's going to give you kind of an up close and personal perspective that you might not get if you are standing 20 or 30 feet away from a rising fish. Now, what he's going to give you in this information, the beginning of this book, is kind of some of the reasons why fish rise under different circumstances. What their body language tells you. If it's a sip, is it a slurp? Is it a gulp? Is it a splash? Do you see their nose? Do you see their mouth? Do you see their dorsal fin? Do you see their tail fin? Now, there's been a lot more information. There's a lot more resources using much nicer cameras and video footage that have come out in the last 50 years. But the information is still the same, and it's so helpful in figuring out, should I be fishing a spinner or a dun or an emerger? Should I be approaching from the side or from the front or the back? Because part and parcel with watching these fish is understanding what fish see, both that fly that's approaching them and what's going on around them. The men that took these pictures and paid attention to these fish were effectively sitting in trout blinds down at surface level with that water so they could pay attention to these fish and not be detected. So it's an incredibly valuable resource. It's a lot of stuff that you will eventually pick up implicitly as you are fishing over a long period of time. But a resource like this, or somebody who can kind of show you what's going on, gives you that information in an explicit manner so you can make better decisions on your approach, your fly selection, as well as your presentation of that fly. Now, another cool thing about this book is that the second half of it is nothing to do with fishing dry flies. I mean, it's tangentially related, but it's the kind of thing you probably aren't going to get a publisher to sign off on today. But it happened in the 60s and the 70s and even into the early 80s, where the second half of the book talks about fly rod construction, about using nymphs and using midges as well. And then there's also some profiles of limestone creeks in the mid-Atlantic as well up into the Midwest. So it's a really great book, nice large format, along with those color plates in the beginning, just absolutely beautiful photography of some of the streams that Marinaro was fishing and doing his research on. One quick note on that. Some of these streams have degraded in the last 50 years, but a number of them are actually doing better. As cool as these pictures are and of a historical value as they provide, there's some of them where there's great stream degradation. The riparian zones on the sides of the streams are really worn down. There is cattle feeding all the way up into the water. And we've actually seen improvement in the last 50 years. That's an encouragement for work that Marinaro and some of the folks that were working alongside of him sought to do for them, their children, the generations that followed. But it's just a really fun book, a really kind of quick read. There's information, there's also stories, another great hallmark of books that come from this era. It's not that hard to find. This is the first edition, but you can pick up reprints as well as first editions easily online. I found this particular copy very, very far from South Central Pennsylvania. It was actually in southern parts of the United States. I think in South Carolina. I was in a bookstore and I ran across this copy and picked it up because it was in great shape and it was a first edition. But it's definitely the kind of book that you should pick up from a historical perspective, but also from a practical angling, strategy, and tactics perspective. Again, things have been expanded upon, but this is a great kind of legacy and foundational work that is worth owning, especially if you are fishing these particular streams. And it also, again, has that line of science as well as fly fishing and kind of how really every angler who is involved in the art of observation is effectively applying the scientific method to their fishing if they are wanting to be productive. So is there a book that you find that kind of straddles that line of observation as well as angling and kind of applying some of the science that you might get from this, whether it be optics and refraction or even just the scientific method? Let me know in the comments below. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week and the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.